You're 45,000 years ago in the Zagros Mountains, moving fast through loose scree on a hunting trail. Your ankle catches. You hear the crack before you feel it, a deep, wet snap that isn't the sound of falling rock. Pain arrives half a second later, sharper than anything you've felt before. The animal you were chasing is gone. Camp is 2 days away, and your leg won't hold you. Right now, that same injury means an ambulance ride and a cast. Your odds of simply surviving a broken bone today sit close to 100%. Back then, the odds flip. It should have meant infection, immobility, and death within the week. No antibiotics, no surgery, no safety net. So how did ancient humans survive injuries that should have killed them? The broken bones, the split skulls. The wounds no modern doctor would touch without antibiotics on hand? In 1957, archaeologist Ralph Selecki excavated Shanidar Cave in the Zagros Mountains of northern Iraq, the same range from the opening scene, and uncovered the skeleton of a Neanderthal man who lived to roughly 45. That's old. For a Neanderthal, it's nearly double the group's typical life expectancy. His skull carried a healed fracture that had likely blinded one eye. His right arm had withered to almost nothing below the elbow. His right leg bore a healed break of its own. Researchers could tell all of this from bone remodeling, the slow way a skeleton reshapes itself around old damage over months and years. Every injury had time to knit back together, which means none of them killed him. Everyone assumes a Neanderthal that disabled would have been left behind. Or worse, the bones argue otherwise. Someone chewed his food soft enough to eat. Someone guided him over broken terrain he couldn't navigate alone. He survived for over a decade after the worst of his injuries, proof that the real survival tool wasn't a stronger immune system. It was other people willing to carry the weight. That explains care after an injury. But what about actual surgery, cutting into a person on purpose to save their life? In 2018, researchers John Verano of Tulane University and David Kushner of the University of Miami published an analysis of more than 800 trepanned skulls from Peru, skulls with deliberate holes cut or scraped through the bone to relieve pressure on an injured brain. In the earliest examples, dated to around 400 BCE, only about 40% of patients survived. By the height of the Inca period in the 1400s, that number had climbed as high as 80 to 90%, as surgeons learned to cut shallower holes and avoid the membrane covering the brain itself. Everyone assumes cutting into a skull with a rock was a death sentence. It wasn't, not by then. Compare it to the American Civil War, 400 years later, with metal scalpels and formal medical schools behind them. Battlefield surgeons lost 46 to 56% of their skull surgery patients. Andean surgeons working in stone and obsidian were keeping more people alive than doctors during one of the deadliest wars in American history. Surgery is one kind of survival. But here's where it gets stranger. Most ancient injuries weren't treated with a blade at all. They were treated with plants. In 2012, a team led by archaeologist Karen Hardy analyzed dental plaques scraped from the teeth of Neanderthals found at El Sidern Cave in northern Spain, home to the remains of at least 13 individuals dated to roughly 48,000 years ago. Trapped in that calcified plaque, they found chemical traces of yarrow and chamomile, two plants that are bitter, low in nutrition, and useless as food. Everyone assumes Neanderthals ate whatever they could catch or gather, with no line between food and medicine. But bitter plants like these aren't something you eat by accident. Neanderthals carried a gene for detecting bitterness specifically, so they'd avoid plants like this one. Choosing to swallow it anyway looks less like a mistake and more like a decision. The same decision your grandmother made every time she brewed chamomile tea for an upset stomach, 48,000 years later. Here's a problem, though. Plants and stitches don't stop an open wound from rotting. So what did? Around 1600 BC, in Egypt, a document now known as the Edwin Smith Papyrus recorded 48 real surgical cases, likely copied from an original written 1,000 years older. Egyptologist James Henry Breasted translated it in 1930, and what he found surprised him. Almost none of the treatments relied on magic. Physicians closed wounds with linen sutures, splinted broken bones with padded wood, and packed open injuries with honey and moldy bread. Everyone assumes that kind of treatment was superstition, something people reached for because nothing better existed. It wasn't. Honey holds almost no water, which starves the bacteria that cause infection, and it produces hydrogen peroxide as it breaks down. A real, working antiseptic. Moldy bread carries early strains of the same mold that would later give the world penicillin. Doctors today still pack medical-grade honey into wounds for exactly the same reason, 3,600 years later. Line up all four of these: the Neanderthal who lived a decade past his injuries, the Andean patients outliving Civil War soldiers, the plants chosen for medicine instead of taste, the honey and mold packed into wounds 36 centuries before anyone had heard of bacteria, and a pattern shows up that has nothing to do with luck. None of these people survived because their bodies were tougher than yours. Your body, unprotected, is exactly as breakable as theirs was. They survived because somebody else showed up. Someone remembered which plant worked. Someone knew how deep to cut and how deep not to. Someone fed a person who could no longer feed himself, and did it again the next day and the one after that. The real reason ancient humans didn't simply die from everyday injuries wasn't medicine in the way we use the word now. It was memory, passed mouth to mouth, tested by trial, and sometimes by death. Refined across generations until it worked more often than it failed. Go back to that mountainside, the ankle giving out beneath you, 45,000 years in the past. You are not doomed the moment you fall. You are only doomed if you are alone. Someone hears you. Someone comes back for you. Someone remembers the plant that helps and the way to splint the bone, because someone remembered it for them first, going back further than anyone could count. Today, you carry almost none of that knowledge yourself. You outsourced it to hospitals, to strangers in white coats you will likely never meet twice. It's a better trade than your ancestors had access to. Nobody is arguing for the obsidian blade over the operating room. But it's worth noticing what the trade cost. A species that once healed each other with memory and touch now mostly heals each other with a phone call and an insurance card. Ancient humans didn't survive their injuries because they were tougher than you. They survived because they were never really alone with them. And that, more than any bandage or blade, was the medicine.